How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. This is the show where we talk about all things that are related to making music, even loosely related. From creativity to philosophy to gear and techniques. My name is Brian Funk. I'm your host. I have a website called brianfunk.com where you can find tutorials, Ableton Live packs, music, and the new music you're hearing right now for the show's intro, I made with my Juno 106 Ableton Live pack. Most of those sounds, except for the guitar and the bass, and also the drums, which come from Reverb Machine. He has a drum kit called Drum Tracks, which I think is awesome. I end up using it a lot. But all of the rest of the music is from my Juno 106 Ableton Live pack, which contains sounds of the Roland Juno 106. So you can find that at brianfunk.com if you're interested. So thanks for tuning in. Today I want to talk about being prolific. This keeps coming up more and more every time I try to find the secrets of creativity and making music and being productive. Being prolific seems to be the answer. There's no shortcut. There's no easy answer. It's just getting to work. It's a quantity over quality thing in many cases. And I just kind of want to talk about it a little bit, give you some of the things I've heard recently that I found pretty inspirational and try to share that with you a little bit. Maybe we'll start with the old 80-20 principle, which if you haven't heard of, everyone's kind of talking about it these days, is that 80% of your results tends to come from 20% of the things you do. And this applies to a lot of things. It applies to wealth distribution. It applies to profits for companies, all kinds of things. And if we apply it to music, if you really look at an artist, a typical artist, most of their revenue or listens or streams or however you want to measure success comes from a very small percentage of what they actually do. And I had a look at the Beatles, who were one of the most successful groups ever, and they're an extreme case. And I found via Google that they released 213 songs. I'm not thinking that's counting like all these like unreleased things that have since come out, but I think that's official like album releases. And if you get into their unreleased stuff, there's a ton more. A lot of it's pretty fun because it's very experimental. But they have 213 released tracks, and depending on whether you're looking at the UK charts or the US charts, 17 or 19 number one hits. Now that's not even 20% of the things they released, and that's a huge number, by the way. 17, 19, it might be the highest. I think they're competing with Elvis maybe, but that's not really the point. The point is that's not even 10% of their tracks that reach that level of success anyway. And they're the Beatles. They're the top. So think about this. What is 20% of your work? What is 20% of my work? It's not much. And a way we can increase the odds is by being more prolific, to create something every day if we can, or as often as possible. The more you do, the more chance you have of doing something great. I really enjoyed my talk with Sahil Lavingia of Gumroad, and he's a painter. And one of the things he talked about a lot is how when you try a new painting every single day, you're more likely to take chances, you're going to try new things, and you'll grow because you're doing things, you're pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. But if you only work on like one painting for a few months, then it becomes really precious. Every stroke of the brush really matters. And you're afraid to ruin it. You're afraid to see what happens if I try this. And that's where a lot of the growth comes from. I know I find myself kind of laboring over things sometimes and wind up not really doing much, sitting there for hours and just tweaking a few knobs, maybe on a compressor or an EQ or something, and you get nothing done. But when I do get in the spirit of just banging things out, I first of all think I have more fun because I'm not as stressed out about it. But I'm also more willing to just try things. And a lot of the things that I do regularly now came out of those little sessions where I just said, hey, let's see what happens when I do this, when I try that, when I add this, when I take this away. And I'm often surprised at what comes out. And it's helped me get things done faster because now I've got these new techniques I can use when I'm working on stuff. So your work becomes less precious, and I think that's something we need to all get over, everything being so precious. Again, to go back to the Beatles, if you read a lot of their interviews, especially like the John Lennon ones, it's not precious to him at all, and he's pretty critical of his own work, which I guess most of us are. But they see it as just like what they were doing. They were showing up in the studio, they were recording, they were writing songs, they were just doing it every single day, and it wasn't a big deal. And that's probably why they were such a big deal, is because of that hard work and showing up every day. Before the United States even saw the Beatles, they had done thousands of hours of performance in Germany and in Liverpool. They were playing all-nighters routinely just to hone their craft. And I think that's a big part of their success that we don't necessarily see, but it's that putting in the time and just keep going, keep going. So things become less precious. Another little thing I came across, and I'm just kind of rattle some things off because maybe something will stick. It's shaken me up a little bit to hear some of these things so one after the other over the last like 2 or 3 days, and I'm hoping I can translate that into some productivity. But anyway, Tim Ferriss has a really nice email list you can get on called 5 Bullet Friday, and it's just 5 things he sends out every Friday, whether it could be anything really, things he's listening to or video he watched. It's a cool way to keep himself busy, I'm sure, by just putting out 5 useful pieces of information or interesting pieces of information he came across with during the week. Anyway, he puts this quote in from Francis Crick, and it is amateurs who have one big, bright, beautiful idea that they can never abandon. Professionals know that they have to produce theory after theory before they are likely to hit the jackpot. And I think that's a great example of what we're talking about being prolific, where we could try to get this one perfect idea into something, or we can just keep trying things and trying things. I mean, a lot of the great inventors invented a ton of things. They were just constantly producing things, theory after theory, before you hit the jackpot. And if you want to go with that jackpot gambling metaphor, I think it applies. You're not going to win on the first try. You got to keep showing up. Your odds increase. Of course, your odds of losing increase too, but you're not going to be able to win it if you're not in it. Earlier today, I was trying to find out who came up with this quote, and I don't know if this is the right place to attribute it, but I heard somebody say that quality comes through quantity. A lot of times we think of quality over quantity or whatever, like they're at odds or something. But somewhere I heard that quote. Sorry that I don't remember who I can give it to. But while Googling it, I came across this website of a Redlands photographer. And what I think is cool about this, just like with Sahil, is that he's a painter. This person's a photographer. His name is Bruce Herwig. And he's got a website post. And he's talking about quality and quantity. And he gives this like really cool story of a ceramics teacher that divided the class in half. And he said one half of the class will be graded on quantity and the other class will be quality. The quantity group basically gets their pottery graded by weight. So if you have 50 pounds of pottery, you get an A, 40, you get a B, and whatever the scale is. But the people being graded on quality only need to do one thing, but it's got to be perfect to get an A. And as a student, I would ask, what group do you want to be in? Do you want to be in the group that gets a grade for producing a number of songs, or the group that gets graded on one song? And think of just the difference in the pressure. You can bang out ideas real fast, and if you're consistent, and you can really just keep moving, putting things out, trying things, getting experimental, and probably learning a lot more. Or you can just labor on one idea. And the fact of the matter is, if you don't have a good track, a good song, It doesn't matter how much you labor over it. It doesn't matter how well it's mixed or produced. If it sucks, it sucks. And I think kind of the opposite is true. If you have a beautiful idea, even a bad recording of it is still nice. I'm sure if we threw a microphone, let's take like the highest quality Neumann through the best preamps and had just any old idiot sing on it, maybe the recording would sound good, but I'm sure if you held up an iPhone microphone to say like Whitney Houston or someone like that, it would be so much more enjoyable to listen to. So the performance is key, the song is key, and you're more likely to find those by just producing more and more. I would way rather be in the quantity group. I think it's freer, it's more fun, it's less pressure. And I think we often forget how this is supposed to be fun because we stress out about the results so much and getting things, getting attention and whatever how it is. We stress out about all that stuff, but we should just be having fun, enjoying it. And I think those feelings of not having something be so precious is where a lot of excitement comes out of, and a lot of really good ideas too. I've kind of realized as I'm talking, I do this with my high school students when I teach English. They teach writing. One of the activities, one of the grades they get, and it's 20% of their grade, is a notebook. And I grade the notebook on the number of pages they write. It's quantity over quality. And I specifically say that, and I tell them this is not a place where your writing needs to be perfect. I don't care. It can be all terrible writing about anything they want. The only thing they can't write about is they can't do work for other classes in their English notebook, but they can take their notes in there. They can write down ideas. They can do rough drafts. Whatever they want to write in their notebook counts towards the notebook, and they get graded on the number of pages. I very simply just go around and count how many pages they have in their notebook, and they get a grade based on the number of pages every quarter. And it's 20% of the grade, so it's quite a lot. 1/5 of the grade is just the amount you write. And I've had a lot of students, they always freak out when I tell them how much you need to write to get an A. It's 30 pages in, I guess, 10 weeks. But that's really not much if you do a little bit every day or if you're just keeping up with the course. Anyway, they often freak out about it because it sounds like a tremendous amount of work. But it's the one assignment that I get people telling me really helped them a lot, especially kids that have gone off to college. Sometimes they'll send me an email and be like, oh, thank you for making us write in our notebook like that. It just made it so much easier for me because they got so much more practice writing. And we get better at doing things by doing things, not overthinking it, not just showing up once in a while, but by doing it as much as possible. I kind of think of like a fighter, like whether it's UFC or a boxer or something. They don't just hope for that one knockout punch. That's not what they do. They train every single day, all day long. They keep showing up. They spar, they fight, they do, exhibition matches or whatever. They're not going to just hope that one shot will work. And if you think about it, if you're only producing like one track every so often, you're really just like showing up at the fight hoping that your wild haymaker is going to land or your Hail Mary pass is going to score. Much better to just progress little by little so you don't get knocked out. So right now I'm reading Stephen King's book called On Writing, a memoir of the craft, and it's nonfiction. It's a book about writing, and it's great. I'm about halfway through it, and I'll probably do a whole podcast on it. But he talks about this idea of the muse. His mission is to write 2,000 words a day. So he is a strict discipline guy. He shows up and he has to produce 2,000 words every single day, no matter what. And I like that approach a lot. He suggests maybe as a beginner, you'd start with like 1,000, make it a little bit easier. But we could do that with music for sure. We can make it, you have to finish an idea, a song, I don't know, maybe by timing yourself. Though the timing thing I think is tricky because it's very easy to waste your time and think you're being productive, decide to like reorganize your studio desk, or you are going to go look up tutorials on YouTube and you think you're being productive, but you're not. Actual time making music, I guess, is how you'd have to do it. But maybe a result is a better way to go about it. Whereas he does 2,000 words, maybe you need to have at least like a section of a song or an idea. I don't know. I haven't figured it out either. That's why I'm talking about it, to try to sort it out. But he talks about that. I want to read you a little passage from this book, and I've read it somewhere or heard it somewhere. I don't know where. Someone else excerpted it, I guess, but I love it. He personifies the creative muse, this like force, and I think you've probably tapped into it. It's why you probably keep showing up making music. That feeling like you have the inspiration and you're being creative and things are coming out great and you're having fun and you're losing track of time. So this is from On Writing by Stephen King. There is a muse, but he's not going to come fluttering down into your writing room and scatter creative fairy dust all over your typewriter or computer station. He lives in the ground. He's a basement guy. You have to descend to his level. And once you get down there, you have to furnish an apartment for him to live in. You have to do all the grunt labor. In other words, while the muse sits and smokes cigars and admires his bowling trophies and pretends to ignore you. Do you think this is fair? I think it's fair. He may not be much to look at, that muse guy, and he may not be much of a conversationalist. What I get out of mine is mostly surly grunts, unless he's on duty. But he's got the inspiration. It's right that you should do all the work and burn all the midnight oil, because the guy with the cigar and the little wings has a bag of magic. There's stuff in there that can change your life. Believe me, I know. Love that comparison of this like guy you're working for with a cigar, and he's sitting there and he's ignoring you. He doesn't care about you at all, and you got to do everything. And once in a while, if you're lucky, he'll sprinkle you with a little bit of inspiration. And I think that connects, maybe this is where I heard it actually, I don't know, but Stephen Pressfield's ideas from The War of Art, another great book, where you have to show up every day and you got to find the inspiration. The amateur waits to be inspired before they get to work. The amateur wants to feel the moment is right. The amateur wants everything to be perfect, wants to be hit with an idea and create art out of passion. And just, we've really fantasized or made the creative experience this like fake thing that kind of isn't real. It happens once in a while, I guess, but this like divine inspiration thing, Stephen Pressfield will tell you it's all bullshit. And in those words, that's why I love The War of Art. He's not pulling punches. He's so direct, and he's just calling you out. But he says you got to show up every day and you got to dig it out and find it. Kind of like what Stephen King says. You got to make everything right. You got to show up. You got to be there. You got to cater to it. And maybe if you're lucky, it comes out. Now, I think if you're making music or you're writing or whatever you're doing, you're probably doing it because you do love it on some level. And I don't know where this started happening for me. As a kid, I would pick up my pencil. I used to love to draw a lot. Or I would pick up my guitar and just want to do it. I always did it. It was just fun. Somewhere along the way, it became this like effort. I got to do it now. And like you have to almost psych yourself up to get started. I'm like that so much to this day, where I have to kind of pump myself up and almost force myself to get down into the studio and do something. I can find every other thing in the world suddenly fascinating. Doing the dishes is like so urgent suddenly, because now I'm thinking about making music. Everything is so important now when it's time to make music, and it's a way to avoid it. And I really don't know when that switch happened, but it definitely did. I don't remember feeling that so much as a kid. Just did it, just for the love of it. But if you are doing this, hopefully it's because you love it for the fun of it. And what I find is that once you show up and get going, usually something happens that reminds you and you say, oh yeah, this is fun, this is cool. You get lost, you get sucked into the moment. I think there's a little bit of trust we have to have that if we show up, we will find that eventually. And most of the time it happens for me, and I bet it happens for you too, but you got to show up and do it. You got to go down there and find the guy with the cigar and make everything right for him. A great activity that we did, we do every year, is January, where you have to write a track every single day. I shouldn't say write a track. It's create a little musical jam. So just basically show up every day and make a little bit of music, record it, and share it. That's the idea. I guess it's like the proof. I did it. Look at me. But it's such a great exercise, and it really should be kind of like the way of life. Stephen King would be like, every day's January. What are you talking about? But I did it hardcore in 2018, every single day. And I was listening back to those recordings yesterday. And I had a few in mind that I really liked that I wanted to make into full tracks, and I'm kind of in the process of, all this time later. They're becoming real precious, I guess. But in listening to it, I was like, man, there's a lot of really useful ideas. You could probably have like a good EP or album's worth of stuff based on this. And I also noticed the adventurism in the music. There were some days where it was just like, obviously, I decided to have a little fun. And it's not always the greatest piece of music, but there was something in those recordings that I could enjoy because of the spirit of it. So, this January, definitely get on that, do January. But maybe we should really be making that part of our everyday experience. Be strict with a schedule, be on time, show up every day, same time maybe is what you got to do. It's like exercise or working out. But that act of being prolific like you are in January just makes everything a little less important and a little more fun. You're not taking yourself so seriously. Speaking of January, I want to transition to what I consider a very inspirational story from Chef Elf, or Nate Beaudry. Nate, aka Chef Elf, did the January thing in 2018, as I was doing it as well, but he didn't stop. He did February Jam and March Jam and May Jam, and he went all the way for a year and kept going and made it to 500 days. 500 days he produced a piece of music. And a lot of it was really awesome. He did so many cool 8-bit versions of famous albums. The whole album. I did a podcast with him. I'll put the link in the show notes so you can check it out. But I mean, it was just incredible what he did. And he did it for 500 days. And I just reached out to him to find out if he was still going, but he said he stopped at 500 so he could work on projects more, which I think is totally fair. And it's a heroic number. And maybe one day, at least a year and a half from now, I could say that I did 500 days in a row, though I'm not necessarily holding myself to that. I know I'm not holding myself to that, but it's an inspirational story to think about. But I asked him, what'd you learn from that? What's something you got out of it? And he said 3 things, which I thought were great and helpful. So this is kind of, I'm going to sort of wrap this episode up pretty soon, but what are the benefits of being prolific? And what he said, for one, he got so much faster at producing. He improved his workflow. And again, that's a nice side benefit of this. I mean, we're kind of talking about results and making better music, but how about just getting to know your tools better and how to do what you want to do so that when you are inspired, when the guy with the cigar is sprinkling his fairy dust around, you know what to do with it. You can act on it and you can hold on to it longer. If you get that inspiration and then you got to go figure out how to hook up your interface, or you forgot how to do this or that or the other thing, man, you're not going to stay inspired for very long. Cigar Man's going to leave. So getting faster at producing is great, and he probably learned a lot of cool shortcuts and workflows that worked well for him. Um, he also just mentioned the what that he was able to let go of perfection in favor of just getting it done. And that's something we all have to do, is let go of perfection. There is no such thing as perfection in art of any form. Nothing is ever perfect. I don't know if it's just attributed to Da Vinci, but um, somebody, maybe Leonardo da Vinci, said art is never finished, it's only abandoned. I think it's a good way to look at it. You just kind of need to stop working on it after a while. And if you're trying to be prolific, you have to stop and finish something in order to move on. So he says he was able to let go of perfection and be okay with things that are imperfect and just get stuff done. And for someone that enjoys perfection in music so much like I do, I like when things are a little out of tune, not perfectly on the grid, they don't sound perfect, the recording is a little off, in a pleasant way. It's funny that I feel things still need to be perfect, you know? But if we can let go of that and just not hold on to it as much, we can get stuff done more. And the last thing he said is he just really got a lot out of the discipline of doing work every day, of showing up and doing it. It was a powerful feeling. I'd like to add, what I think he got out of it too, is that he went through the whole process of writing a song every single day. So what I mean by that is a lot of times we start songs, we don't finish them. We do a little bit and maybe we show up, we start another thing. So we get real good at starting tracks, but we don't get so good at finishing it because we don't practice that part as much. Each part of the process is a stage that needs to be practiced. And finishing is probably the thing we all do the least of. Now, what happens when you actually have a really good idea and you need to finish it, but you don't really know how to do it? That's not good. So by being disciplined and showing up, you get to also just go through the steps every single day. And to me, that leads to this empowerment. When you do something repeatedly over and over again, and you realize you can do it and it's not impossible, it's so empowering. It makes you almost feel like a superhero, like you can do anything. And that now it's not so daunting and scary anymore. I think that's really what we're kind of hiding from a lot of times. Why coming down to make music, something I supposedly love to do, is so much less important than doing the dishes all of a sudden when I have time to do it, is probably out of fear. What if I don't make something good? What if I can't think of anything? What if it doesn't, people won't like it? All these things, it's fear, but by showing up every day, we can build this empowerment. I've had a little taste of that from time to time. I retasted it yesterday by listening to some of my January stuff and realized, like, wow, look at that. I did it. And that was a year and a half ago, and I'm better now. So I felt kind of empowered. And I, in reading all this stuff and hearing all this stuff yesterday, I made it a point to make some music first thing in the morning. That's what you heard in the beginning of this episode. That's the little piece of music I made yesterday, because I decided that I wanted to get down and try to produce something as often as possible, hopefully every day. But one good trick I kind of figured out too is that if I make it the first thing I do, then it will be most likely to get done. So it's really easy to put other things first, smaller tasks that are easy to accomplish first, and then then you'll get to the big important one. But I think that's a bad way to work. You want to finish the most important thing first so it actually gets done. And yesterday, for whatever reason, all these quotes and things I've read recently, I guess, I felt less lazy. And I got to work. And rather than kind of just look through my library for sounds, I busted out the guitar and the bass, and that's why they're in that song. And I've been trying to play more guitar lately anyway. And I had that quick moment of I don't feel like going and getting the guitar and plugging it in and putting a mic up. I had that quick moment, but I just did it anyway. And the revelation I had was that it takes as long as it does to find a sound in my library anyway. So you open up your user library, your browser or whatever, and you start looking for sounds and you start shuffling through them. And no, not this one, not this one, maybe this one. No, I like this one better. You do that for a little while. I hooked up my guitar and had it ready to go way faster than that. And that was a cool feeling. And that's one of the benefits of this idea of being prolific, is that you kind of realize that it's all in your head. You're making all this stuff so much bigger than it really needs to be. It's not so hard. It's not so difficult. You just got to do it. And perhaps that's where we will end today, because maybe instead of talking about making music, I should go and make some music. And maybe instead of listening to me talk about make music, you should do the same. Thanks so much for listening. I hope this helps a little. It, again, always helps me to get these thoughts out of my head, and I'm kind of psyched to do something. So I'm gonna get out of here now. I appreciate your time and hope to see you back on the next episode. If you're enjoying this show, I should do this. I never tell people to like, subscribe, hit the alert button. But if you are enjoying the show, maybe you could leave a short review wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's iTunes or wherever else people get podcasts. It does help a lot. It helps get the word out there and makes my show show up higher on the list of suggested podcasts. So I would appreciate that. That'd be really cool of you. It's very nice when people do that. Makes me feel happy. So go on now, make some music, have a great day, and be prolific.